I think that the next generation is going to have a lot of opportunities to create new things, and I think our role here in H Farm College and H Farm in general is just to be there to support them and help give them everything they need. Each one will have different needs, and we just need to help them in that process. Hi, I'm Timothy O'Connell. I'm a US citizen, but been living here in Italy for over 30 years. I am the director of the Startup Center here in H Farm. I've been working with H Farm since 2009, and I'm a professor at H Farm College where I teach entrepreneurship. My passions are pretty straightforward. Apart from entrepreneurship, which is also a passion, it's not just work. I love traveling, I love meeting people, exploring. The other is sailing. I grew up in a family of sailors, so I've sailed most of the Adriatic. And then the third one is just family, just very, very closely tied to my family in the US, my family here in Italy. If we can go to the mountains, we can sail, or we can travel, I'm happy. And I left the US at the end of my undergraduate work. And so I came to Europe as a ski instructor. I was a ski instructor in Cervinia. I met my wife, so I ended up back here in Europe. Once I finished my graduate work, my wife and I, we moved back and we got married. The formative periods, they always work to stimulate new ideas. I was never just learning for the sake of learning. I was always learning because there was things that were interesting me. And that period, I think, was important. It taught me how to study, how to learn, how to take information and create ideas around that information. And that probably stimulated my first interest in also entrepreneurship, because when I did eventually move to Italy in 1993, I opened my first company here in Italy in that period. So one of my first activities was as an entrepreneur. The shop Mountain Adventures, it had a great success run. Being a young entrepreneur, it was very stimulating, and then I had an opportunity, an offer to sell it. So my first exit came very soon. And then it was really the time, 98, when internet and e-commerce was just starting to explode, and that was when I realized that my love of entrepreneurship, and also my love of doing things that were new was definitely going to go in that direction. So in 98 is when I first started getting involved in everything that was digital, figuring out how internet was going to impact businesses. It was also the same period where Riccardo and I met. Riccardo used to come to the store, and because he was also passionate about the mountains. Also Riccardo, obviously his success with eatery, of course, I knew quite well. And we were, kind of doing parallel tracks for many years until we re-met up around 2009, 2010, and that was when I officially started to collaborate with H Farm. For years and years, I found that when something happens, usually it's a coincidence that something has led me there. For example, me being here in H Farm was a coincidence. Riccardo and I, after many years of not seeing each other, we happened to be at the same event together in Venice, where, ironically enough, the founders of Dropbox, Instagram, were all presenting, and they were all kids. I remember Dropbox, they were presenting what the cloud was, and we were all trying to figure out what he was talking about. And we just happened to run into each other, and I was looking at new things that were happening in technology and digital, and Riccardo was basically building up H Farm, and he was like, hey, come and visit us in H Farm. That was, I guess, my butterfly effect. I think entrepreneurism was always just something that I felt comfortable with. I like the idea of starting new things. I like the idea of creating businesses, and the fact that I started to make it more of a structured approach, I think it came with time. Probably one of the key moments was in 2012, when together with Riccardo and the other partners here in H Farm, we decided to create an event which we called the Global Accelerator Meeting, which we called GAM. It was time to bring together all of the leaders working with startups, creating these types of ecosystems together. So we had these accelerators from all around the world who came together, and we spent 3 days together talking about what it means to accelerate startups. And that, I think, was probably a defining moment for us here in H Farm, but also for me, because then I realized, okay, this is something that really can make a difference on an economy level, but also on an ecosystem level such as our own. Following the evolution of H Farm, it was just natural for us to start working with students. If, in the beginning it was just startups and it was just a small group, it kept slowly going down into the food chain, to the point now we're even working with high school students. So working with college is fantastic. The opportunities as a student that you can get here in H Farm are extremely unique, and I think that that's what makes this such a great ecosystem to be in. I think I'm at the point in my own personal journey where teaching is a great way to give more back to an ecosystem. Going into teaching and working with the university means you can work with hundreds of students, and it means you can impact hundreds of young people and what they think they can do, giving them the understanding of what problems are and how problems can be confronted as an entrepreneur. This period in time in particular is obviously it's like a dream. Creating businesses and entrepreneurship is super stimulating, and I don't think there's any place in the world that has anything to teach us after all of the things we've been through. I mean, H Farm is, we're almost at 20 years now of doing this, and we've seen everything you can imagine. And now to have the opportunity to teach all those experiences and share all those, what works, what doesn't work with students is obviously it's a privilege.